I'm Cynthia Wenzel, now McCarthy. Grew up in Clearland till age of 20-ish and just have a love for that little village. He and his wife had been living just a few houses up with relatives with his sister. And they had three little children at the time, then built this house in 1910. We know that because 1910 is in the basement it was put in the wet concrete of one of the few, I think, poured basements at that time. And it's a special basement because my grandfather was planning to have his coopering business, so building barrels. One corner of the wall of the basement had this concrete tank that could be filled with water for soaking the staves for making barrels. They would have built a small mill for milling the lumber. Originally hired local men to work, but his sons eventually grew old enough to, and they were all employed in the business except my father, who was the baby. I think that the coopering business that he built in that house started, I'm thinking, in the area of 1915, so a few years after the house was built. When I was a little girl, we still had the cooper shop there. We still had what was called the shed, which had the saws, the equipment for milling the lumber. So all the equipment was there, and it was like our playground. So we played in the cooper shop and the shed. There was also a burn, so they kept a cow or two along with the coopering business. There was just a big demand for barrels back in the early 1900s, apparently, with the fishing industry. Also, the house had what we knew as the storeroom. It was called the storeroom not because it was for storage, but because the house had been used also as a store. We also had a grocery truck that came around to the community. I remember you get on the truck, you put the step down at the back and you get up into the truck, and both sides were lined with canned goods and baking supplies, and of course we'd get on to get a bag of Scotty's potato chips or something like that. When we were little, in the 50s, there was a powerhouse. That was part of our world, to go down to the powerhouse and look at the dam, play along the river, go to the pond and gather pollywogs and bring them home, take them to school. The community of Clearland, in my grandmother's age, her ladies, my grandmother's women, had a club. It was just called the club. It was a quilting club. What I remember of the club as a little girl was when they would have their closing. I guess it would be everyone would take their turn hosting. So when it was my grandmother's turn to host, my mother would be busy making the lunch for them. One year she made special aprons for everybody with their initial on the pocket, because my mother was a beautiful sewer. And then at the school, the club often had a community social. The school had grade primary to 6, finished grade 4 in Clearland, and they opened a big consolidated school in Blockhouse. We walked up in the morning, back home for lunch. It was half a mile, so back after lunch and back home after school. When it was winter, we would cut across the ice on the lake if it was frozen. If Mom had said it was strong enough for us to do that. At the school, we didn't have playground equipment, but we had our games that we played, and there was a big wood pile delivered every fall. And so the biggest game was when the boys would build forts with the wood that had been delivered, and then chase the girls to drag them into the fort. Yeah, it was that kind of school with where the teacher rang the bell when you were to come in. And sometimes the teacher would go across the road to have coffee with the neighbor at recess, and recess might be a little longer. It had such a community feel. When I look back, that's what I remember. And what I think about is that do kids get that feeling? They know a few people, they know their parents' friends, even my own children. How did they didn't have this kind of experience that it was your world. You get so busy with your life that maybe you don't miss it. I think that early on, you just want to get away. You want to get away from the small place. Um, and there's so many big adventures ahead of you when you're in your 20s that, I can't say I was missing it then. It's just now that I've got time to look back and have this perspective.